Hi again. Here we are to continue talking about our Weather API library, right? And in the last video, we set up a callback to handle a response from our API, and we displayed the response here, and then we set up a callback for an error message, right? So if there was an error, we would call this one, right? And we handled it here. Let's take a look at how we would catch this error, how we would pass this callback in. Looking at the main code, you can see that we have 4 parameters, right? And here they are here in our code. We've got zip code, API key, and then this third one is rather long, right? It goes all the way to here. Okay, so that's all of this is the third parameter. And we can put a comma here. And the fourth parameter, that's the error callback, would go here, right? So this would be our fourth parameter. And this one would receive an error object, and you would handle that error object in here. So we could console.log, error.message, right? Or you could do something else. You could display a message up in the DOM here or something, right? So now this is getting, kind of ugly here, right? So this is not super nice to deal with. And if it was more complicated, could get even more, nested, right? So how can we improve on this, right? Let's see if we can. I'm trying to think of a way to get the error to show up. You got to realize that when you call OpenweatherMap, if you give them like the wrong address, it actually is a successful fetch request. And so even if OpenweatherMap returns, some, I don't know, I want to call it erroneous weather data, like city not found or something like that, it's actually a success here, right? And if fetch fails, will be down in this catch block, okay? So just because we get an error message in the base JSON from OpenweatherMap doesn't mean that we're in the error zone down here, right? So it's hard to actually simulate this particular error in what we're doing here. But anyway, this is what we've got here. And, I kind of like this, but I think that we have a lot of parameters here, right? And if we wanted to add in the unit, for example, then this could get even longer. So how else can we deal with this that would be kind of a nicer way to work with it? Well, let's try something here, right? I'm going to go back to the OpenweatherMap API, and let's talk about promise for a minute. So it might be cool if our API here, or this when we called OpenWeather, that it returned a promise, and then we could say .then on the promise and .catch like we did over here, right? So how would that work, right? Let's talk about it for a minute, right? So remember, fetch is going to return a promise, okay? So you can say const, if I say like P1, like promise number 1, then it would be what was returned here. So let's kind of rewrite this. I'm going to kind of write this like long form, right? I kind of wrote it the shorter form here, and we could have shortened it even more, but then it kind of hides like some of the things that are going on, right? So if we, call fetch and it returns a promise, this is an object, and what we're doing really is we're calling .then on the promise that was returned here, okay? And here, if we're calling response JSON and returning it, this is returning another promise. So actually, if we say const p2 equals the promise returned from this call to then. So the promise here is what's being returned into p2. And so that means down here we could say p2, right? And then we could say, this is where you're going to handle your JSON, right? Okay, as you kind of follow me there, it's kind of a little complicated, right? And then over here on any one of these promises, we could say, .catch, okay? And that's really what's going on here, right? So what would be kind of cool here is what if we returned a promise maybe at this step, and then we could just handle that promise here, and then that would kind of simplify our code a little bit, right? So let's give that a try, right? So what I want to do is and then we could call the dot catch over in this zone, and then that would be kind of easier over on this side. So I'm going to get rid of this dot catch here, and then right here where we called, you know, promise number 2, I'm actually just going to say, what am I going to say here? Actually, let's just do this. Let's get rid of all that, and we'll say return promise number 2. Okay? So that means that that actually simplifies this code a lot, right? So that means over here in our index HTML, get weather is now going to return a promise. So we won't need this stuff. I'm going to get rid of that just for the moment. We'll just pass in the zip code and the API key, and then this is going to return a promise. So that means we can call .then on the promise that was returned, and then we can catch our JSON response here, and then when we get the JSON we can say temp display dot, you know, inner HTML equals, you know, JSON main dot temp, I think it was, right? And if there was a problem, we could put a dot catch on the end, and then in the parentheses here we'll add a function, and here we'll catch the error message there, and we can log our error message, right? So that kind of simplifies a little bit, right? Let's give it a try. So I'll log the message in case there's an error, right? So let's give that a try, right? So we'll refresh it here. Oh, it seems to still be working, right? So that's really great. Let's take a look at the code we wrote and talk about it for a minute. So we've got the get weather method, and we're passing in 2 parameters, zip and API key. This returns a promise, so we call .then on the promise, and then we supply a callback to the promise, and when the promise resolves, it passes in its payload, whatever that is. It happens to be JSON data, so we get the JSON here, and then we can use that JSON data however we're happy to use it. And if there was an error within that promise, then we catch it here, and it skips to the catch block and gives us the error message, and then we can log that or handle that however we want. Okay, and again, over here we just returned this promise, right? Okay, and we could wrap this up and do more with it, but this is what we have here, right? So or this is what we have here for now, right? So anyway, I hope that's interesting, and you know, we can improve on this even more, right? So this is one evolution of the whole process, right? And we'll be adding more to this in the future. So anyway, thanks for watching, and I hope that was interesting, and you can post any questions to the comments.